One of the new arguments against the repeal effort that we're getting from the supporters of Common Core is that this is just we're making it political. You know, I find that ironic that we are making it political. The idea that we, just these little moms with no power, would even think to interject ourselves into the very representative system of government of which we have authority over and that we pay for. And that's what they're crying foul on. And that's exactly where we're supposed to be. This is where we were supposed to be. This is our responsibility to our children. And a parent has to reclaim that first and final authority over their child. And this is the window to do it. Once this closes, once they turn that machine on, your opportunity is lost forever. They have to act now, and they have to rescue their children, reclaim their classroom, and reseat their authority over their child, moral and academic education. Time is up. It's now. We've been so conditioned in all aspects of our lives. There's an expert to look to for that. Go find out what you're supposed to do. But it's been no place has it been more disruptive than in the education of our children. That we would allow somebody else in a removed place with probably at least one or more interests ahead of our actual child's well-being to be making those decisions for us. We've accepted that for so long now that's why for 2 years, 2 weeks ago was the 2-year anniversary of when I first reached out to Columbus. And I was told, it's just a different way of teaching. You know, and that's when the whole tinfoil hat descriptions came, and you know, PARCC was a little slow in using the term hysterical.
That
started 2 years
after he
ago.
got elected.
But you know, as it's played out, we've gotten to this place where we are now so angry and so concerned that we're willing to say, you know what, we're bucking the system. You've left us no recourse. Again, the machine is the PARCC. Now, while it may be, for sure, the one leg of a three-legged stool, getting rid of PARCC does not solve our problems. Right. Because the standards are aligned to any assessment. So we're going to get PARCC's twin. We have to get rid of the standards. But today, because they have done nothing to help us, we have to put a tourniquet on the bleeding so that we can eventually get to the major surgery that needs to be done. And that's what the opt-out provides. It provides a stopping of the bleeding to protect your child, protect them from the testing, protect their data from being sent to the consortium, which is under contract, has to give it to the feds, and can give it to anyone. For-profit, non-profit, or any governmental agency they so choose. That's what we have to stop first and foremost, because they would refuse to pass any legislation to do this the right way. And I warned them for a long time. I said, you know, there's mechanisms for us to blow it up from the outside. Don't force us to do it that way. It's not going to end well for you. Because at the end of the day, unlike every other industry that they try to shove down our throat, whether it's regulation, rules, and so on and so forth, they need us more than we need them. Is there anybody in this room that doesn't think...
that again? I'm sorry to interrupt. Please say that phrase again. I just want people to hear that about how they need us.
They need us more than we need them. I mean, if you were to put it an analogous with Obamacare, you know, I cannot treat myself. I can't treat my child, but certain things I rely on the medical industry. They can destroy it, but I'm at the mercy of whatever they're going to leave behind for me. It's not the same with your education. Only you know more about your child than anyone else. Education isn't rocket science. You can get them there. And it's so much more about education, because again, it's not their just academic upbringing and their well-being. It's their moral. That's why education is at the local level, because it's not just your child, it's not just your home, that extends out into your community. That's why Garaway, having that type of district, that's why people feel comfortable.
they talk about home values. No, that's what's going to draw people to districts now. The fact that people care what parents have to say. Not how much their home values are going up, or how much they're basically doing the circus show for Columbus, because that's what it is. This is like circus tricks. And who does it best? That's what these tests are. These tests are not designed. There is no academic quality to them whatsoever. They're designed for your child to fail, because you know what? If your child passes, you don't need another one, right? I mean, Representative Limerchuk mentioned about there's been no progress. Well, there's been plenty of progress in the profit area. And that's what this has all been about for a really long time. And a very good example of that is the fact that last June, because the organizations that supposedly represent us, the local school boards, the the Superintendents Association, Buckeye Association, Superintendents and Administrators, all those organizations are the very ones lobbying in Columbus for the things that you're feeling, that are hurting your child's education, your tax dollar, and your local school. And they said, well, the tests aren't to see how well the child does. The test is to see how well the teacher's teaching.
Oh, gosh. See, teachers should be outraged. Yeah.
I mean, this is all about, if you go back, I don't want to spend any time going back in history about education policy, but that's where it comes from. The genesis of this is this move to standards-based reform that's controlled by DC. Yeah. And if you go back, it all sounds wonderful, because who can argue with higher standards, right? I mean, why are these parents upset about higher standards? Well, standards used to be called curriculum frameworks, because that's what they are. And the government can't be involved in curriculum, right? That's a local control issue. So they renamed them standards. But if you go back and dig through all the research materials, the objective was, how do we get the teachers to teach what we want them to teach? And it's worked brilliantly. That's the phenomenon of teaching to the test. That all came out of the Clinton administration in 1994, where they pegged federal dollars to grants to the states. And as the representative said, when you start getting legislative policy 3 years behind because it went through the executive branch, through the governor's office, who's never going to turn a dime down, not just our governor, any of them. They don't turn down money. And what happens is that money, those grants go through the governor's office. They give you a little startup cash, just like with Common Core. You get this massive program seeded in. And 3 years later, you've got people who are dependent upon the program. And those very organizations that are here for us, they go to Columbus and start giving appropriations for it. And that's why our education budget, they always want to talk about, well, we've got to do something. I'll look at our remediation rates. I don't know, I look at the budget, you've doubled it in 15 years, and you've got plummeting numbers. Maybe the people in charge shouldn't be the ones coming up with the solution, because you guys are incompetent. That or your objective is not ours, which is actually improve education. And I think that's where it lies. I don't think anybody really wants a solution, because that best way to bigger government is failed policy, right? Because you're gonna hope somebody's gonna come in and rescue and save the system. If you remember anything from today, remember this. They make the rules, they enforce the rules, and they report the numbers for whatever they want them to be. So when you hear remediation rates of this or that, that's who? And based on what? Common Core's higher standards? Really? Show me the empirical evidence. Because the only empirical evidence we have tells us the exact opposite. We're spending twice as much money, and the more government involvement, whether at the federal or state level, there's a linear progression down in terms of outcome. Before the U.S. Department of Education, we landed on the moon, and we led the world in innovation. And today we find ourselves hoping we can be as good as China. I mean, really? Come on. And standardization, the more you standardize anything, a logical, reasonable person realizes, the less innovation you have. That's why we have always been different in America, because we are self-determination. Our kids can, it doesn't matter that they're excellent in math. They don't want to be a mathematician. They get to determine that. So it's not, I don't have an objection to developing children's skills and letting them know what they're best at, but I don't think they need PARCC to tell them that. all these interest surveys. Doesn't your child already know what they're interested in? That's selling information. We don't need to do surveys to tell our kids what they're interested in. They know that. They're telling somebody else what they are so that they can be made a consumer.
That's right.
I mean, all this idea of this informed by data, but yet everything they're doing is not informed by data. They're working against everything we know and everything that's been proven true already. So with that, before I keep droning on, what we've come to right now is this threshold of where parents are like paralyzed. It's like, well, what about my teacher? What about my district? I heard my district isn't going to get the funding. I guess, to me, I have a hard time, partly because of my personality, but also, I just can't go there. I mean, when I get call after call, well, my principal said I can't opt out. I said, what was your response? Well, I brought my letter back home. What should I have said? You should have said, or what? What are you going to do to me? Excuse me, sir, or ma'am. This is my wishes. I'm exempting my child. It's in their best interest and for their well-being. Any other questions? I mean, that idea that, again, that conditioning of, they told me I couldn't. There's 3 entities right now that is on everybody's mind, and I get that. I'm not being callous to that. And I'm certainly not being callous to the teachers. But at the end of the day, from the moment you became a parent, every parent's first and primary instinct is what? Protect their child. It's your moral responsibility and your first obligation. So I'm sorry about the district not getting their funds, but you know, they should have listened to us for the last 2 years, right? I'm sorry about the teachers. But the teachers, because they did have a union that got the language put in 487, they need to go to their districts and say, hey, extend to me what you guys got. And the fact that 487 was passed without anybody saying, well, you know, I'll vote for that, but I'll vote for it if you put an exemption in there for the kids. That tells you everything you know about education in Ohio. That no one even thought, but yet they could find every reason in the world they couldn't do anything to repeal it. When they had hundreds and hundreds of parents sitting in the atrium for 8 hours one day. And Jerry Stubbleton had the audacity to say that we were making it political when we were a small vocal minority. I mean, they had never had any, those kind of numbers turn out for a House Ed Committee meeting. And to this day, his last comment on the entire thing is that this is his legacy, and once it's completely rolled out, it won't be as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be. Wow. That's great to know. It won't be as bad as we thought. Rob, can you advance that one? This is the letter that sent the state on fire evidently Wednesday when I just wrote it down. But there was a lead up to this. This didn't just happen out for no reason. And as I've been told by very honest legislators, there are a few in Columbus, nothing in Columbus happens by coincidence, ever. On Tuesday, well, besides the opt-out gaining momentum, which is scaring them to death, on Tuesday, there were 17 superintendents that appeared before the Senate Subcommittee on Education. They were there not testifying in House Bill 7, which there's been some miscommunication on Facebook about that. They were there by invitation from Senator Lehner, who is the chairwoman of the Senate Ed Committee, to speak to the recommendations that Superintendent Ross put forth at the end of December. In 487, one of the other things that they came up with to fix the problem for the parents was they wanted the testing analyzed. How much time was spent on testing and recommendations to reduce it. And that charge was given to Superintendent Ross. So he made the recommendations at the end of December, and these superintendents were brought in to testify on it. I have received some of the written testimony that was offered as well. It is scathing. They all run out of PARCC. They all think it's awful. They don't think it does anything for the child. They know how detrimental it is to the district. And the underlying theme to all of it is We want our classroom time back. You know, all we do is test.
And recess.
And there was actually one superintendent I know of, and I believe he wasn't alone. It wasn't just he was testifying against Hart. He made it quite clear he wants it all gone. He's old school when he said, I want my school back. I want my local control that you keep talking about, this nonsense of what Governor Kasich says, that we work these standards. We don't even have any say-so over the testing schedule, much less anything over the standards. So that happened Tuesday. That's what instigated this memo that came out Wednesday. And this again comes down to this conditioning that we've all gone through, which is the student participation. Federal and state laws require all districts and schools to test all students in specific grades and courses. There is no law that allows a parent.
I know, I read that.
That's great. Well, then show me the law that prohibits me from doing that. Because, sir, we don't live in a dictatorship. We live in a land where our laws, as a self-governing constitutional republic, I only have laws that prohibit my behavior if I'm going to harm another person, harm their property, or act something that does something to the public good. We don't need a law to allow us to be parents. And this is the mentality of Columbus. But we didn't tell you you could do that. Oh, really? I mean, that would be like saying, well, we didn't say that you could take your child to that particular doctor. Forgive me here, but that's the same mentality. But for some reason in education, again, we've accepted it. And that's why this is blowing up, because they never thought that the people might say no. So there's no law. Not that you could make it effective anyway. I don't know how you place a statute on a 10-year-old's head and say you're going to take this test. But the idea that this is what scared people I find amazing. And it saddens me. But the thing that picks me back up from that opt-out page has been shared over 22,000 times. So this idea, people want to do this desperately. So we've got to get the word out that this should actually compel you even more to do it. Because it's kind of like the last stand in negotiating with terrorists in a way. If you don't walk this out, you have lost all credibility. The next scare isn't going to work. And in the meantime, they'll find more ways to make it more punitive to try it the next time. Again, coming back to the safe harbor. They don't seem to think that that's a big deal, that safe harbor for districts and teachers as Ohio transitions. Who's Ohio? Are those Ohio children, I presume? But yet, no one again thought we need to protect our districts and teachers. This very system that we've decided we have so little confidence in to judge our districts and our teachers is good enough for the kids. We don't know that it's good enough to score a district, but it's good enough to keep little Johnny out of 4th grade. It's good enough to put in his permanent record to follow him through for the next 10 years. I mean, that is really sick. I mean, if you think about it in the basic terms, that is really awful.
And Heidi, are we not, they're not even going to have those results until middle of the next year anyway,
yes.
So why does that matter?
So here we get, one of the big things is the districts now are, again, trying to come up with every reason why, oh my gosh, you have to do this, okay? You won't get placed in your honors classes. You won't be able to take AP classes. We're going to make it a part of your course grade.
Or you're not going to graduate.
You're not going to graduate, which is all the end of course. I don't understand quite how they're going to pull that off, because as Tom Gunlock, who at the time was the vice president of the state school board, he is now the president of the board, okay? And just like at the local level, how it was described, the hierarchy, the State Board of Ed is the boss. He clearly states the results of how your kids do on the new Common Core test that they'll take at school this spring won't be available for months, possibly and not until 2016. Forget seeing state report cards for schools and districts by their normal late August time next year, said Tom Gunlock. The multi-state consortium running the new test, the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career, read this twice too, won't make a key and potentially controversial decision until next fall. I thought we had local control. This consortium, multi-state consortium, so now you've got involvement where we are supposed to be a sovereign state and have state and local control over education. We have a consortium deciding whether our kids are passing, failing, or in between. And they're just not going to get around to that in time. So the test scores won't know which test scores count as good ones and what scores count as bad ones. And that's outside the state. Our representation on that multi-state consortium is Dick Ross. He was unelected and unaccountable. We're not going to get the report cards until 2016. Well then, how in the world are you going to put anything related to the spring 2015 test into my child's folder and make any determinations for the fall of 2015? He said, and that's not unless everything goes off according to plan, which it never does. They don't seem real concerned about getting these back, do they?
No.
No, because it's not about the scores.
No, it's about the money.
It's about the money, it's about the data. Because remember, as soon as they turn the machine on and your child fills out a form, that they've got the data. It's just impossible to make things happen any sooner unless you want me to choose to cut scores. Well, actually, Mr. Gunlock, that would be a great idea because you're actually in charge. That's your job. Because everybody reports to you at the end of the day. So I would like you to either have the cut scores, be in on that conversation, or know who is and know that they're competent to do so. But evidently we have farmed that out. And I don't think anybody wants that. Well, I failed to disagree, but we just have to be flexible. There's just nothing we can do. I mean, their own statements run contrary to everything they say, which is, you know, you're going to harm your child, the progression to his graduation, the progression to honors classes, placing them in their reading group. But he's saying there's nothing we can do about it, and we won't know until 2016. I mean, it's to the point of being so unreasonable that, you know, to me, you should be able to file an injunction and get this thing stopped. The big questions that have come up on repeatedly, particularly on Facebook, that you answer over and over and over again is it legal to opt out? As we said, yes, it's legal to opt out. You're the parent. You're the first and final authority over your child, period. Can I exempt my child from any and all spring PARCC testing? This is almost like the perfect, because of their desire to cover for themselves, covering districts. And then also because the Ohio graduation test is still in place for 10th graders and older. Okay, so there's nothing that's going to happen in the spring of 2015 that's going to prevent a child from advancing because they've replaced the 3rd grade reading guarantee with the OAA again. You can exempt your child of any and all PARCC testing and have no implications on your child's future.
Including 3rd grade?
Including 3rd grade, because the 3rd grade reading is OAA. So when you opt out to a 3rd grader from the PARCC math, that's got nothing to do with the advancement for reading. While House Bill 7 basically reiterates what is currently in law but isn't just as obvious, and in the course exam, that's okay. There's nothing in law that says the child has to take the end of course exam immediately following the course. They just need it before they graduate. Okay, so we won't take it spring of 2015. Because spring of 2016, we'll get rid of this then by then. You know, so it's like, parents have to be a little more savvy in thinking about how they're going to, what they would do in any other circumstance to protect their child. If their gut told them something was wrong at the doctor's office, they wouldn't leave it there. They'd pursue it. Same thing. But that doesn't make sense to me, Mr. Principal. You know, that's okay. Here's my exemption form. My child is not to be sit for the administration of the test, and we'll catch up with that end-of-course exam next year or the year after we so choose that we need it. The new thing is, evidently, that people are having to sign a form that exempts their children out, saying that they realize that their child will never get into college. And the only thing I can imagine that the basis for that is, and which again, it seems like everything they do to get out in front and to prevent something actually just, causes them to trip and fail. But the reason they can probably say that is because one of the fixes, going back to the remediation rate and who controls the numbers, is all of Ohio's public higher ed institutions were a part of the PARCC agreement. And we had a 100% participation rate in our higher ed institutions that said any child that comes to us from a college and career ready high school or Common Core standard high school, we will be prohibited from requiring remediation. So guess what's going to happen to your remediation rates, right? They're going to plummet, but it's not because anything effectively has happened for the good. It's just because the calculation of the remediation has changed. And OSU now can't require remediation because they signed onto the PARCC consortium and said, as long as the child has a Common Core curriculum and passes your assessment, Mr. PARCC, which is, again, as we know, outside the control of the state of Ohio, we are now, as an institution, guaranteeing you we will not require remediation. As soon as the private schools catch on to what's going on, which many of them have, there are colleges that don't even require standardized entrance exams. They look at your transcript, the strength of your classes. They know that tells them more than what this. If you've got a kid that takes tests really well, they may not work very hard. This may just be very, very bright. Good test taker. You could have a kid who's brilliant, who has test anxiety, has never done well on standardized tests, but has a fabulous transcript, works a great work ethic. A private college wants them. So in reality, what they've done is instead of higher ed dictating to K through 12 what is higher ed material, it's been reversed. K through 12 is going to dictate to colleges. This is what we can do for you, and this is all you're getting. Because the question I've always had with this remediation rate that they float around in Columbus, which happens to be the same remediation rate in every state, just so you know, is why is any college, aren't they embarrassed to have a 40% freshman class in remediation? How did they get in? I mean, when I went to college, you had to get into college. No one was going to remediate you in. If you didn't get in, then you went someplace else first. Or you realized, what, this isn't my path. But you didn't make half or almost half of your freshman class remediation students. So again, that's a whole nother animal, but the reason that's happening is because it's subsidized again from the ruling class in DC and in Columbus. Those higher ed institutions were coerced into getting along. Because why? Because they get so many state dollars. They're not going to get in conflict with Columbus. They're going to sign and do whatever they're supposed to do so they can have their multi-million-dollar student centers outside of academics. So again, it's all of the things have been taken off of the objective of the child, their future, and ultimately, the idea of workforce development and the economy. A thriving economy is a manifestation of a solid culture, which, let's face it, is based on the family. So this idea that we can force a good economy while we let everything else go, it's flipped of how we need to be. We need to be focusing on stabilizing and supporting families, having choices come from there, empowering parents, and that manifests into a solid economy. That's how it used to work. Instead, we want to tweak it, and there's a few that eat really well, and then the rest of us basically are slaves to the system due to regulation, rules, and the empowerment, basically money and influence. Bill Gates is a perfect example of that. Okay, Rob. Now, this came to my mind one night when I was on the phone with a mom, and she said, "But can I?" I mean, Wizard of Oz was always my favorite movie. I don't know if you remember which Glinda says, "My dear, you always have the power." We've always had this. This isn't like I don't want people to think they need to wait for House Bill 7. They need to wait for the legislators to pass a Common Core repeal bill. Repeal it yourself through your own action of opting your child out And I can guarantee you, if we can get enough opt-outs, you turn the table, because it is all about the money, and they will realize that instead of bullying us, they should have listened to us. Because what I have found in the code is that for every child in the spring who doesn't take the test, in the fall, if they are still within that same district, they're not to be counted in the enrollment. The enrollment number that's taken in October is your funding number. It's in arrears, so that would then fund the next year. So, I guess we are in charge, aren't we? Because there's a district close to Rob that has a large Amish population. There are over 100 opt-outs. That's probably averaging over $500,000. That's going to get a superintendent's attention. So again, they need us more than we need them. This is what we want, and there's no other recourse. So we can all opt out. You can pause the test, replace the standards, whatever. But the sooner the better, because once we do this, there's no going back. I mean, that's the wonderful lesson of this opt-out. That's going to be a sting that they realize, well, we can't even try this next year because these people know now. All they have to do is opt out and not participate.
We've got a short time to do it.
We don't need long. Just need to get your forms in. Rod? This is kind of like a one-screen synopsis of what happened. And what they tried desperately for 2 years to get us to believe. That a national assessment, directed and paid for by the feds, aligned to copyrighted standards, which have never been tested anywhere, were never developed by educators and academic professionals, but rather by a former consultant from McKinsey & Company, yes, the firm that advised Enron, who just so happened to become the president of the College Board last year. It has aligned the SAT to Common Core as a state-led voluntary initiative. It's time for our local boards and parents to demand that the governor and the state legislature admit they were bought off by the feds, duped by a corporatist posing as a philanthropist in order to monopolize the education industry and nationalize education. That is Common Core. Yes. And it's not Common Core standards, it's the Common Core State Standard Initiative. And the initiative is the standards themselves, the national assessment, the data collection, and the teacher evaluations. They took this idea of standardizing education to get the teachers to teach what they want them to teach, and they went full bear with it. This idea that you would connect a little 8-year-old's score on one single day of that year and make up 50% of a teacher's evaluation on that, that is criminal. That doesn't serve anyone, especially the teacher. And this high-stakes testing has just been taken to a whole nother level by doing that. But our teacher evaluation systems are now dictated by the federal government. Our students, what is defined as success is being determined on the Potomac and in Columbus. That used to be our job. And again, this whole idea of aspiration, self-determination, that's what we do. That's what our kids should get to do.